The city of Varith hummed with tension, a living current that seemed to sizzle beneath the ancient alloyed floors, vibrating up through Marcus's boots and into his bones. The air was thick with the taste of metallic dust and ozone, sharp on his tongue, as if the entire metropolis were charged with static, waiting for a spark. He kept pace with the Xylan archivist beside him, an elder whose skin was marbled with veins of living silver, the lines pulsing faintly under the overhead lights. The archivist's eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, wary as they passed beneath archways carved with swirling glyphs. "Remember, Terran," the archivist murmured, voice barely louder than a breath. "The matriarch respects only power. Those who have not survived the Blade Rite are less than nothing here. Only the worthy are seen." Marcus inclined his head, feigning a composure he did not entirely feel. The gravity of this place pressed against him, ancient and unyielding. Still, he straightened his spine as they reached the Hall of Ascendancy, its great bronze doors yawning open, the surface etched with the story of blood and conquest. Inside, Matriarch Zera awaited, a monolith of authority, her scaled brow adorned with ceremonial rings, her voice slicing through the charged air. "So the Terran Union sends a diplomat," she sneered, her tone thick with disdain. "Fragile, soft-skinned, ill-suited to witness our most sacred tradition." Marcus bowed, low but not too low, careful to show respect without surrender. "I am honored by your welcome, Matriarch Zera. I am here only as a witness, and to learn." At the matriarch's side stood her daughter, Sirali. She loomed, at least a head and a half taller than Marcus, her frame angular and imposing, draped in layered metallic fabric that shimmered with each subtle movement. Her skin was a living tapestry of iridescent scales, shifting from deep indigo to violet, catching the fractured light in mesmerizing patterns. 4 amber eyes, unblinking and sharp, regarded him beneath a prominent bone crest, her gaze calculating, her mouth set in an inscrutable line. Sirali moved closer, circling Marcus with silent predatory grace. He resisted the urge to turn with her, remaining still as she appraised him. "You are smaller than I expected," she said, her voice low, edged with derision. "No claws, no armor. The Terrans must be desperate." She tapped his shoulder with one curved talon, a gesture that hovered between playful and dangerous. "Did you bring anything sharper than your tongue, little envoy?" Marcus met her gaze. "I assure you, my words are not meant to cut." He nodded toward the ceremonial blade at her hip. "Today, I am only here to observe." Sirali's lips curled in a half-smile, all contempt and challenge. "Then watch closely. Here, weakness is a death sentence. You have survived only because you are unseen." Her claws trailed off his shoulder, leaving behind a faint heat where they had touched. With a flick of her tail, Sirali led him through the labyrinthine streets of Varith. The city was alive with eyes. Nobles watched from shadowed balconies. Warriors paused in training yards, their attention drawn by the sight of the matriarch's daughter escorting a Terran outsider. Sirali's silence was deliberate, her steps echoing with the confidence of the strong. The route twisted and doubled back, designed as much to unnerve Marcus as to display him. He studied his surroundings, noting the way sound seemed to bounce and twist through every corridor. His footsteps, her gait, the distant hum of the city, they resonated, amplified by the arched ceilings and alloyed streets. "Your city is tuned," Marcus said quietly, half to himself. "Not just constructed, but engineered for resonance. Every sound finds an echo." Sirali paused, her surprise masked by a sharp tilt of her head. "Few notice," she said. "Most are too busy watching their own backs." "Sound can be a weapon," Marcus replied, glancing up at the carved domes. "Or a message." Sirali regarded him for a moment longer, unreadable, then turned away. Come, the archives await. Inside the vast records hall, the air cooled, thick with the scent of ancient data crystals and oil. The Xylan Elder presented a series of artifacts and holographic records, each one flickering with spectral images from centuries past. Marcus reached out, studying a relic etched with the symbol of the blade. Sirali scoffed, her tail lashing the floor. You waste your time on legends, Terran. The strong shape the future. Stories are for the weak who need comfort. Marcus traced the glyphs thoughtfully. And yet, the blade has chosen no champion in centuries. Your people perform the rite, but the blade remains unmoved. Perhaps your ritual is now only performance. A flash of frustration crossed Sirali's face, quick and fierce. My mother is the strongest to walk these halls. None can challenge her, yet still the blade is silent. We do not need your human riddles. Marcus met her gaze. There is a myth, even older than the blade. The first chord. Harmony that could move mountains. She snorted. A tale for hatchlings? I do not believe in such things. He smiled gently. On my world, sometimes harmony does more than strength alone. She moved closer until her iridescent scales almost brushed his chest. With a deliberate, careful motion, Sirali extended one clawed hand and brushed his sleeve, the touch slow and deliberate. A test, a warning, and something more. The moment crackled between them, tension and curiosity sparking in the charged air, neither of them ready to name what it was. For the briefest instant, Marcus let himself wonder which would prove the stronger, blade or cord, strength or harmony. Then Sirali withdrew her hand, and the city's pulse seemed to quicken, the question hanging between them, unanswered and alive. The chamber of judgment thrummed with anticipation, every surface alive with the low resonance of gathering power. The vast circular hall, lined in black alloy and etched with shifting runes, was already crowded with Xylan elites. They watched from tiered balconies, their scaled bodies draped in ceremonial finery, the air between them thick with the perfume of heated metal and tense expectation. At the chamber's heart, on a raised dais, the blade hovered. A weapon forged from ancient living crystal, its length pulsing with indigo light, casting shifting shadows against the walls. Each pulse sent a ripple through the energy field that radiated outward, making Marcus's skin prickle as if charged by static. He kept to the periphery, eyes drawn to the blade's hypnotic glow, even as the Xylan aristocrats whispered and gestured toward him with open derision. On the dais, the first champion stepped forward, a towering Xylan clad in burnished armor, his crest adorned with victory rings. He bared his fangs in a silent snarl, then reached for the blade. The weapon did not move. A sudden surge of light flared, blue-violet and searing, and the champion was flung backward as if struck by invisible hands. He crashed against the steps and lay stunned, the crowd's silence broken only by the soft crackle of discharged energy. He was helped away, his pride as scorched as the plates of his armor. One by one, more champions attempted the trial. Each time, the result was the same. The moment their hands closed around the blade, the energy field expanded in a violent rejection, hurling them back, sometimes a few paces, sometimes clear across the dais. Some rose quickly, embarrassed but unharmed. Others lay groaning, disoriented, their scales singed and smoking. A few did not rise at all, carried away in shameful defeat. Then Varric approached. He strode forward with the confidence of the inevitable, broad-shouldered and brash, his scales lacquered to an almost mirror shine. His lips curled in a smirk as he caught Marcus's eye. "Careful, Terran," he called across the chamber, his voice carrying above the murmurs. "Stand too close, and you may be swept away by the wind of greatness." Marcus met his gaze, offering only a measured nod. I hope you're ready for the storm, Varek. The crowd chuckled, but Varek's attention was already on the blade. He flexed his clawed hands, then gripped the weapon in both fists. For a heartbeat, the indigo light seemed to swirl around him, coiling in tight, serpentine arcs. The chamber dimmed as if the blade drew in all illumination, focusing it into a single, blinding point. Varek's body arched, feet leaving the dais as the energy lifted him clear off the ground. For a moment, he looked triumphant, exultant even, until the blade flared again. With a violent shudder, Varek was hurled through the air, landing heavily on the polished floor below. The stink of scorched armor filled the chamber, and Varek did not rise. A hush fell, broken only by the crackle of the blade's field and the matriarch's voice, cold as the metal beneath their feet. "Is there no champion among you?" Zara demanded, her gaze sweeping the hall with a contemptuous sneer. "I remain matriarch, unchallenged. Varek, son of Isk, will succeed me in time. None here are worthy." The chamber erupted in a storm of voices, some in protest, some in support, others offering names or cursing fate. Marcus watched as Sarali, who had stood at the edge of the dais, rolled her shoulders and stepped forward. The crowd's arguments quieted, a wave of expectation rippling through the air. Sarali's approach was slow, deliberate. Every muscle in her 7-foot frame was taut, her scales shimmering with blue-violet fire under the blade's light. She paused before the weapon, 4 amber eyes narrowing as she studied it, then reached out, taloned fingers wrapping around the hilt. The blade's energy surged, a roar of sound and light that pressed against the chamber walls. Sarali's jaw clenched, her body trembling as she held fast. For a long moment, longer than any before, she endured, her silhouette outlined in indigo fire. The crowd gasped as the weapon's field seemed to flicker, as if considering her. Sweat beaded on Sarali's brow, her claws digging into the crystal, smoke curling from her hands. Then, with a final convulsive flare, the blade repelled her. She staggered back, hands smoldering, and dropped to one knee. A hush of awe and despair rippled through the chamber. Zara rose from her throne, her voice ringing with finality. "The rite is closed. I remain matriarch, and Varek will ascend after me. Let none question the will of the blade." Debate exploded around the hall, nobles shouting, warriors protesting, the old traditions and new ambitions clashing like swords in the air. In the chaos, Marcus stepped forward, raising his hand in the gesture of the Union observer. "Matriarch Zara," he called, his voice cutting through the tumult. "By Union protocol, if no champion of the blood prevails, the impartial observer may attempt the rite. It is the law of witness and tradition." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I request my right." The hall erupted in jeers and incredulous laughter. Nobles leaned over balconies, scales rattling with amusement. "A human?" someone shouted. "Will he sing the blade to sleep?" Others cackled, hurling insults in a dozen dialects. Sarali's eyes flashed, her humiliation a living thing. She turned away, jaw tight, as her mother's lips curled in icy amusement. "So be it, Terran," Zara intoned. "Let the blade humble you, as it has humbled the strong." Marcus stepped up to the dais, the jeers echoing in his ears. He kept his gaze steady, his breath slow. The blade's field prickled against his skin, a living force that seemed to probe his very thoughts. He reached out, not with the force of muscle or the arrogance of power, but with careful, measured reverence. He placed his palms on the blade, closing his eyes, feeling the pulse of the city's design, the hidden music within the walls, the hum of resonance beneath his feet. The memory of the first chord echoed in his mind, a legend dismissed by warriors but cherished by dreamers. He drew a breath and, softly, let a single, pure note slip from his lips, a tone that matched the frequency he'd heard everywhere in Veyrith, the one the city itself seemed to sing. The sound grew, quiet at first, then swelling as the chamber vibrated in sympathy. The blade's light flickered, then softened, the field warming and swirling around his fingers. The jeers faded to stunned silence. Marcus's voice held steady, unwavering, as he let the note linger, guiding the blade into harmony with the city's own resonance. Then, with a soft chime, the energy field melted away. The blade loosened, gliding free into his hands as if it had always belonged there. The silence in the hall was absolute. Nobles gaped, mouths agape, disbelief written across scaled faces. The matriarch sat frozen, her composure cracking for the first time. Varric, still prone, stared in mute horror. Sorali knelt where she had fallen, awe and wonder warring on her face. Her disdain, her scorn, all vanished, leaving only raw, unguarded amazement. She bowed her head, trembling. The light of the blade shone between them. Suddenly the dais erupted with a web of holographic blueprints spinning in midair. Defense grids, ancient power conduits, secret vaults. The very heart of Veyrith unfolded, its secrets unlocked. The myth was real. The blade was the city's master key. Marcus stood, the blade steady in his hands, feeling the weight of destiny settle across his shoulders. For a heartbeat, the fate of Veyrith, its legacy, its power, belonged to him. Chaos erupted before the last echoes of silence had died. Matriarch Zara surged to her feet, her voice a thunderclap that shattered the stunned hush. "Seize him!" she roared, talons splayed, her eyes blazing with fury and humiliation. "The blade is not for outworlders. Arrest the Terran." The guards, hulking Xylan enforcers in scaled armor, hesitated, hands flickering over shock staves and energy nets. But the chamber itself seemed to turn against them. From every archway and column, ancient defense turrets emerged with a hiss of displaced air, crystalline lenses glowing with cold blue light. They swiveled, not toward Marcus, but toward the matriarch's throne. A tremor passed through the assembly. Nobles flattened against the walls, scales clattering in alarm. Zara snarled, baring her fangs, her authority slipping as ancient code responded to a new master. "What treachery is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling at the edges. In that charged instant, Sorali moved. She stepped between Marcus and her mother, drawing herself up to her full height, the blade now in her grip, tip angled downward but ready. "The rite is fulfilled," she announced, voice ringing clear across the chamber. "The blade has chosen. By our oldest law, he is the rightful wielder. I stand as his shield, even against my blood." A hush swept the hall, shock, awe, and the first hints of new allegiance. The turrets held their aim, the city's ancient intelligence awaiting command. Zara's face twisted in betrayal. "You would betray your own kin for this weakling?" Sorali's jaw clenched. "I honor the right. That is all." Marcus met her gaze, the weight of her choice settling between them. For the first time, he saw not only the warrior but the woman, loyal, proud, and, in this moment, alone. The standoff broke as guards backed away, their loyalty torn between the old matriarch and the newly anointed. Zara stormed from the chamber, her retinue scrambling after her, leaving Marcus and Sorali beneath the city's unwavering gaze. Later, in the matriarch's former chambers, the air still crackled with unresolved tension. Marcus sat on a low divan, the blade resting across his lap, its crystalline length quiet now, pulsing only with a gentle inner glow. Sorali stood near the entrance, arms folded, eyes never leaving him. Outside, the city's defenses had retreated, but uncertainty lingered in every echo. Sorali broke the silence first, her voice low. "How did you survive the blade's energy? Even I could not endure it." Marcus traced the hilt with his thumb, choosing his words carefully. I didn't fight it. I listened. To the city, to the resonance in the stones and the air. I found its song, its harmony. I followed it, not opposed it. The blade responded to that. Sorali's eyes narrowed, conflicted. Harmony. She spat the word, but the anger beneath was tangled with confusion, even respect. Here, we are taught to conquer, to bend the world. You did the opposite. He looked up at her, earnest. Sometimes power lies in understanding, in creation, not conquest. She prowled closer, looming over him, her claws flexing unconsciously. The blade glimmered between them, as if measuring the moment. What have you awakened? She demanded, her breath a mix of fear and fierce curiosity. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. The founder's gift, the city itself, its systems, its knowledge. It was never a weapon for destruction. It was always meant to create, to lift up. Sorali stared at him, torn. She was the warrior, bred to protect and to fight. Yet here was a man who had claimed the city's greatest power without force. In that instant, her armor seemed to fall away, leaving only a being hungry for answers, defenseless against someone who led by understanding. You are a puzzle, Terran, she muttered, and this city loves riddles. Their dynamic was changed utterly. Marcus, once the outsider and observer, now held Varith's fate in his hands, yet he was more vulnerable than ever, an alien in a court simmering with unrest. Sorali, who could have claimed the blade by right of blood and strength, now stood as his protector, her loyalty a question mark in the eyes of her kin. But her curiosity burned bright, pulling her closer to the man who had rewritten the rules. The early days of Marcus's leadership were a quiet upheaval. The warrior class watched from the shadows, resentment simmering behind polite bows. There were rumors of rebellion, clipped conversations, sidelong glances in the echoing corridors. Yet Marcus, guided by Sorali, moved with cautious purpose. Together, they dove into the city's blueprints, the blade granting access to systems hidden for centuries. Energy flow here is wasteful, Marcus observed one evening, gesturing at a holographic map of the city's grid. The arenas draw more than the entire hydroponic sector. Sorali watched, her tail swishing with impatience. Glory in the ring feeds the spirit of the people. But food feeds their bodies. She glanced at Marcus. You would shift the balance? He nodded. If the lower castes are hungry, unrest will grow. Redirect energy to the farms. The rings can adapt. With a gesture, he traced new pathways in the glowing schematic. Sorali approved, her pride hidden behind a mask of neutrality. She stood guard as Marcus made the changes, their alliance visible for all to see. Artisans and engineers began to approach, bringing tributes of intricate metalwork and precious stones, their eyes alight with hope. For the first time in generations, the city's lower castes saw a harbinger of change, a leader who listened. Marcus received them all, careful to honor their traditions, always with Sorali at his side. In private, their relationship deepened. They traded knowledge, Terran science for Xylan tactics, human philosophy for the art of war. Marcus explained concepts of sustainable growth and communal resource management. Sorali demonstrated the patterns of feint and strike, the logic of the hunt. One night, the city was quiet except for the hum of distant generators. In the control room, Marcus studied a malfunctioning water grid, its lines flickering with error lights. I've rerouted every channel, but the pressure keeps dropping here. He tapped the screen in frustration. Sorali loomed beside him, watching. You attack the problem from every angle, except the right one. In battle, you do not always meet force with force. Sometimes you look for the weakest point, the link that will break under stress. Marcus frowned, considering. He examined the diagram again, this time searching not for the biggest obstacle, but for the smallest crack. There, a minor junction, overlooked, leaking steadily. He reprogrammed the flow, bypassing the faulty link. The pressure stabilized instantly. Marcus exhaled, grinning with relief. You saw what I missed. Sorali's scales flushed a deeper blue, a rare sign of embarrassment. She was unused to praise, especially from someone she had once dismissed. You would have found it, she said gruffly. He shook his head, turning to face her fully. Not without you. You have a strategist's mind, a warrior's intuition. I'm lucky to have it at my side. For a moment, the air between them shifted. Sorali's amber eyes softened, her guard lowering just enough for Marcus to see the woman behind the warrior. Their gazes lingered, unspoken words flowing in the quiet hum of the control room. The tension between them was no longer edged with suspicion or rivalry, but threaded with mutual admiration, respect, and the fragile beginnings of something more. The city, for the first time in centuries, seemed to breathe a little easier. The duel with Varek loomed over the city, a storm gathering just out of sight. Rumors twisted through every corridor, sharpening the appetites of the warrior caste. They hungered for spectacle, for blood. Marcus felt the pressure mounting in each meeting, each sideways glance. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation, as if Vareth had become a living thing craving resolution. Sorali's presence became his constant shield. She shadowed him through the day, her stance always a fraction too close, her eyes scanning for threats no one else would see. At night, Marcus caught glimpses of her silhouette outside his door, silent and unmoving, a sentinel carved from blue-black stone. It was late. The city, a constellation of violet lights stretched beneath a restless sky, when Sorali found him on a high balcony. He stood with the blade across his knees, gaze fixed on the labyrinthine streets below, the faint hum of the city's core, a comfort and a warning. Sorali's approach was soft for someone of her size, but he felt her before he heard her. You should rest, she said, voice low, tension humming beneath every word. Tomorrow the eyes of the caste will be upon you. They expect Varek to draw your blood. Marcus's lips curled in a rueful smile. Let them expect it. I am not here to fight Varek on his terms. She moved closer, her scales catching the light, iridescence shifting from deep blue to violet. Varek will not show mercy. He has trained his entire life for dominance. If you falter, he will not hesitate. Marcus turned to face her fully. I do not intend to falter, and I do not intend to meet him as he expects. Sorali studied him, suspicion and curiosity warring in her gaze. You have a plan? I have something better, Marcus replied. I have understanding and help. He paused, searching her face for openness. I have read about the Veyrin focus, the centering ritual your champions use before combat. I think I should learn it. Surprise flickered across her features, a rare vulnerability. Few outsiders know of that, she admitted. Fewer still would ask for it. I want to face Varek as myself, not as a Terran, not as a pretender. Teach me? She hesitated, then nodded once. Remove your jacket. It will restrict your breathing. You must be able to move freely. The moment stretched between them, charged and delicate. Marcus shrugged out of his jacket, feeling the cool air raise goosebumps along his arms. He stood in his undershirt, suddenly aware of how exposed he was, not only physically, but in every way that mattered. Sorali moved behind him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. Her hands, large and strong, settled on him, one between his shoulder blades, the other at the base of his spine. The pressure was firm, grounding. He caught his breath, heart pounding in his chest for reasons that had nothing to do with ritual. Your stance is wrong, she murmured, adjusting his feet with her own. Bend your knees, center your weight. Now, breathe with me. He listened, matching his breath to hers, a slow, deliberate rhythm that filled his lungs and cleared his mind. The world shrank to the warmth of her hands and the sound of their shared breath. Her crest nearly brushed his neck. Her scales shimmered in his periphery. Feel the energy here, Sorali whispered, her claw tracing a slow line between his shoulders. Let it gather, not in your muscles, but in your core. Do not fight your nerves. Let them feed your awareness. Marcus nodded, closing his eyes. He could feel her body pressed against his back, the subtle shift of her weight as she guided him deeper into the focus. Her claws traced gentle, deliberate lines along his sides, her touch both instructional and something more, something that made his skin tingle and his thoughts blur. Do you feel it? She asked, her breath warm against his ear. I do, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Her hands lingered, claws resting lightly at his waist. The boundary between lesson and intimacy thinned, blurred by the pulse of attraction neither of them dared name. Marcus could feel the rise and fall of her chest, the tension in her arms. He turned his head, meeting her gaze over his shoulder. For a moment, everything else faded. The city, the coming duel, even the blade itself. Sorali's eyes softened, her pupils wide. The moment trembled between them, a breath away from something irrevocable. A sudden metallic knock shattered the silence. A sentry stepped into the doorway, his voice clipped and formal. Varric awaits, champion. The hour approaches. Sorali stepped back as if burned, her cheeks darkening to a stormy violet. Her composure returned in a blink, but her hands shook as she folded them behind her back. Marcus reached for his jacket, slipping it on with deliberate care. He met Sorali's gaze, seeing the change in her, something raw and unguarded, a new understanding forged in the heat of shared breath and touch. Thank you, he said quietly. She dipped her head, crest brushing her brow. Remember what I taught you. You do not need to be Xylan to stand tall. Their eyes lingered a moment longer, the air between them charged with everything that had not been said. Marcus straightened, the blade humming quietly at his side. He was ready for the challenge. The duel unfolded in a deserted foundry, a cathedral of steel and shadow at the city's edge. The vast, echoing chamber was all sharp angles and molten light, with gantries stretching overhead and rivers of glowing metal coursing below. Varith watched from afar, every noble, artisan, and warrior tuned in through crystalline screens, their breath held for spectacle and blood. Here, tradition demanded a reckoning. One champion must fall. Varric arrived first, armor gleaming like a second skin, jaw set in a grimace of pure hate. He stalked the gantries with his warblade drawn, claws flexing in anticipation. The air around him vibrated with rage, a storm waiting to break. Coward! He bellowed into the foundry's darkness, voice amplified by the metal and stone. Show yourself! Face me, if you dare! But Marcus was not there. Not in the open, anyway. He stood in the command center high above the floor, eyes fixed on the control matrix, hands moving over the city's ancient interface. Screens flickered before him, displaying every angle of the foundry, every valve and conveyor, every pulse of heat and flow of steel. He breathed deeply, recalling Sorali's lesson, centering himself in the chaos. Sorali watched from the shadows behind him, silent and vigilant. She could have joined the duel, could have called out the injustice of the rules, but she held her place, trusting Marcus to remake the contest in his own image. Varric prowled below, shouting insults, his voice echoing off abandoned forges. You disgrace the right! You disgrace our blood! Come down and meet your end, Terran! Marcus replied through the public address, his tone calm and measured. This city is no longer ruled by brute force, Varek. If you wish to claim leadership, prove you can master more than your own rage. Varek snarled, swinging his blade at a rusted support beam, sparks flying. You hide behind machines. You are nothing but a weakling and a coward. With a flick of his wrist, Marcus activated the first sequence, conveyor belts whirred to life, cutting across Varek's path. Varek charged, smashing the first with his blade, but another swept in behind, nearly knocking him off his feet. Steam erupted from vents, shrouding him in a boiling cloud. Varek roared, slashing blindly, his outline monstrous in the orange haze. Marcus's voice echoed again, steady and implacable. You face the city itself, Varek. Can you conquer it? Varek lunged forward, knocking aside a robotic arm that swung down in his path. Another arm caught his foot, sending him sprawling. He rolled, came up snarling, then advanced, tearing through the automated obstacles with brute force. But the foundry was a maze, and Marcus its unseen architect. Machines shifted, platforms rotated, narrow walkways retracted into the walls. Every time Varek found a straight path, it vanished. Every time he gained ground, Marcus redirected him, forcing him to double back, leap, and scramble. The city watched, rapt. Nobles who had expected a quick slaughter now leaned forward in disbelief. The warrior caste's greatest hope was being toyed with, by a Terran who did not lift a blade. Sorali watched Marcus's hands dance over the controls, his brow furrowed in focus. He will not yield, she murmured, not without a hint of awe. You test him as the blade tests us. Marcus nodded, his eyes never leaving the screens. He believes the world can be broken with enough force. I want him to see another way. Varek battered his way to the center of the foundry, sweat darkening his scales, breath coming in ragged pants. He paused, glaring up at the catwalks. Enough of this. Face me. Marcus switched the cameras, his image appearing on a monitor just across a molten channel, a barrier of liquid fire between them. Varek's eyes narrowed. With a guttural cry, he charged, leaping onto the narrow catwalk that spanned the pit. The walkway shuddered under his weight. Marcus waited until Varek was at the midpoint. Then, with a whispered command, he triggered the final mechanism. Massive clamps snapped shut on either end of the catwalk. At the same instant, hidden servos sprang to life beneath Varek's feet. The platform tilted, and Varek's blade, caught by a mechanical arm, was wrenched from his grasp and hurled away, clattering into the depths below. Varek's feet slipped, claws scrabbling for purchase. He hung suspended above the roiling metal, his massive form reduced to a figure of helplessness, arms flailing. The foundry systems held him fast, immune to his brute strength. The city watched, silent and awestruck. The duel was over. No blood spilled, no blades crossed. Varek, the strongest, had been undone not by violence, but by a mind that refused to meet him on his own terms. Marcus spoke, his voice carried by every speaker in Vareth. This is the new law. We do not conquer by force alone. The city chooses harmony, not domination. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, in slow waves, the realization spread. The old code was broken. The creed of the warrior caste, that might made right, had been shattered before their eyes. Varek dangled, defeated, the truth written in every trembling muscle. At last he looked up at Marcus, hatred and shame warring in his eyes. You have no honor, he spat. Marcus shook his head. I have a city to protect, and a future to build. The clamps released, lowering Varek to the solid walkway. He slumped to his knees, broken but alive. Across Vayrith, the response was swift. The matriarch's supporters, seeing Varek's defeat, did not rise. There was no revolt. No blood was demanded. For the first time in generations, a transfer of power occurred without carnage. In the foundry, Sorali stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride and wonder. "You have done what none thought possible," she whispered. Marcus let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of history settle on his shoulders. "We did it together." He gazed out over the city, its lights flickering with anticipation of a new era. Marcus was now the leader of Vayrith, and the city itself hummed with the promise of change. Marcus stood alone in the Hall of Ascendancy, the blade resting in his hand. Around him, the chamber's vast expanse was a hush of ancient echoes and polished stone, the walls alive with the silent pulse of centuries. Above, light filtered through fractured crystal, casting shifting patterns on the alloyed floor. The city itself seemed to breathe, waiting, every circuit and corridor attuned to the possibilities ahead. He could feel the weight of Vayrith's fate in his palm, a promise and a burden. Yet, for the first time since his arrival, that burden felt lightened, as if shared by unseen hands. The great doors opened on silent hinges and Sorali entered. She moved with purpose, yet there was a gentleness in her bearing now. Her ceremonial robes rippled with iridescent thread, each fold catching the chamber's ethereal glow. Her crest had been polished until it shone, and her 4 amber eyes were soft, their usual fire tempered with warmth and understanding. She paused on the threshold, taking in the sight of Marcus at the city's core, the blade a living line between their worlds. Then she stepped forward, her voice resonant but gentle, echoing through the hall. "The factions are united, Marcus. My mother has abdicated. The city's rule is secure. Vayrith stands ready to follow you." Marcus looked at her, meeting her gaze with calm certainty. "No, Sorali," he corrected softly. "The city belongs to us both. It always has." For a heartbeat, surprise flickered in her eyes. Then a true smile broke over her face. No trace of the old guardedness, only genuine joy. "You are wiser than I thought," she admitted. "I once believed strength meant domination." "I was wrong." She closed the last steps between them and placed her hand on his arm, her touch warm and sincere. Gone was the calculated pressure of their first encounter. This was a touch rooted in trust, in the promise of something lasting. "You showed me another kind of power," she said, "one I had forgotten or perhaps never truly understood." She lifted her other hand and tapped her claw gently to his brow, then to his chest. "Your strength is here," she murmured, "and here, mind and spirit. My people remembered only the body, and in doing so, we lost what mattered most." Marcus covered her hand with his, their fingers intertwining. The contact sparked, a rush of shared memory, triumph, and hope. He searched her gaze, letting his gratitude flow across the tenuous link between them. "It was your courage that made this possible, Sorali. You gave me room to use my gifts. I would have been nothing here alone. Together, we are stronger than either of us could ever be apart." She stepped closer, robes brushing his legs, her body radiating heat and steadiness. Her crest bent until it nearly touched his cheek, the gesture both intimate and ceremonial. "Then let it be so," she whispered fiercely. "I will rule at your side, not as a subordinate, but as your partner, as your equal. Our strengths are different, but together, they are whole." For a moment they stood poised at the threshold of a new age, the chamber holding its breath as past and future balanced between them. Marcus reached out, one arm circling her waist, drawing her against him. The blade, still glowing with the city's light, was trapped between their bodies, a symbol and a witness. Sorali tilted her head, claws cradling his face. "You have changed everything," she said, voice trembling. "Even me." He smiled, the answer written in the softness of his eyes. "You changed me too." Then he leaned in, and their lips met. Her scales cool and smooth against his skin, his hand strong at her back. The kiss was both fierce and tender, a melding of intellect and passion, of tradition and transformation. For an instant, the weight of history seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them and the promise of what they could build. She deepened the embrace, her claws gentle, her frame sheltering him as much as he did her. He pressed closer, the blade held firm between them, the city's legacy remade in their joined grasp. When they broke apart, their foreheads rested together, breath mingling in the quiet of the ancient hall. Sorali's eyes gleamed with unshed tears, pride and relief mingling with the budding joy of something new. In you, I have found not only a leader, she whispered, but a mate worthy of the city's heart. He laughed softly, wonder shining in his gaze. And I have found the courage to hope for more than peace, for true harmony. She nodded, her crest brushing his brow. Let us shape it together. Outside, the city's bells began to ring, a new sound, bright and unbroken, echoing through every tower and street. The factions had laid down their arms, the old guards had bowed to the new. In the Hall of Ascendancy, Marcus and Sorali stood entwined, leaders not by force, but by the unity of their strengths and the promise of love. A new era dawned for Vayrith, not through domination, but through harmony. The city would be led by two strengths, united in hope for a future built, at last, together.